Hello and welcome back, YouTube. I wanted to take this time that I have and I wanted to give my personal, most personal testimony about the Lord, our Lord and Savior, and how He has come into my life before I even knew it. And He's tried His hardest to always guide my life. So I'm going to start off with, oh, yeah, this mask gets on my nerves. I'm going to start off with I was born back in the 1980s. I was born into a house that there was no God. You couldn't speak of God. You couldn't know of God. There was nothing that can be done but to live the way that my grandparents had raised me to be. I was born into a house, into a, uh, let's say my mom was in the house. She was always working. My grandmother and grandfather are pretty much the ones that raised me. Um, and I remember there was one time my grandmother also, she was very abusive to me. And a lot of people that I grew up with didn't know it. I wasn't allowed to speak of it. I was beaten, basically like tortured kind of at home. Um, I couldn't speak my mind, couldn't speak my piece. I couldn't say anything, couldn't talk back, couldn't really ask questions. Because if I did, it usually ended with me either getting my teeth knocked out, my teeth chipped, or I ended up with bruises or sometimes lacerations. All this coming from my grandmother, which was very abusive towards me. So I remember there was quite a few times that I wanted to scream out for help and try to get people to help me because I feared the situation I was in. And I remember I knew there had to be something bigger and greater than my grandmother. And I knew the life. I looked around and I see other kids that are happy, see other kids that are living life, and I'm over here stuck at home. Can't really go out. Can't really do too much of anything. Always having to be around family. Always having to be around, my grandmother, which was very abusive. And so I remember it came to a point that back in I want to say 1997, which was the year that my grandmother passed away, um, it came to a point to where I'd finally had enough. At that time, I was already, let's say, 14, about 14 years old. Yes, I was just entering high school, freshman year. And it came to a point I'd finally had enough of my grandmother abusing me and hurting me, threatening me, doing all these things that I was like, you know what? I'm just going to, I'm going to take the steps. I'm going to get rid of her. I can't deal with her anymore. I got to get away from this abusive relationship. So, what had happened was I had said to myself, God, if you are real, you need to take me out of this situation. I want to flee out of this situation. But I didn't know God at that time. I didn't know what He had in store for me. Didn't know the path that He had laid out before me. And so what had happened was my grandmother was already in the hospital and she had multiple heart attacks. She only had one third of her heart that was still working. And I remember I was into this bowling thing. I was constantly always bowling. My grandfather had taken me up north to Napa for a state tournament. And I bowled in the state tournament. And I remember I did, I think I did pretty well given the circumstances. I was kind of happy my grandmother wasn't there and that it was my grandfather because he was more of a mentor to me and he was more understanding. He didn't really abuse me like my grandmother did, It was him. It was, every now and then I got hit because I was being stupid or I did something stupid. Um, it's funny how kids want to complain nowadays about my mommy or my daddy hit me. Oh my gosh, I need to call CPS because they punished me for doing something stupid. That's not what CPS is for. Come on, because your parent swatted your butt. They punished you for something that you did that was wrong, and you want to call the cops. You want to make a big old stink of it. That's wrong. That's not what it's for. See, it's for what my grandmother was doing to me, and nobody wanted to reach out to them to help me. I think it's mostly because nobody really knew what was going on with me. And see, I always knew I had to have straight A's when I was in school. I always knew I had to always try my hardest. No matter even if I was doing my hardest and I had failed a few tests, I would go home and as soon as my grandmother found out, I would be getting my butt beat for it. Because I was told you're smarter than this. Parents, I'm gonna tell you right now, don't punish your kids just because they're trying their hardest. The way these schools are now, it's like I look at my 16-year-old and I look back and I look at how I was and I look at how he's doing, and it's like I want him to do better. And I tell him that verbally. I want him to do better. I know he can, but I'm willing to accept what he can do because the way this educational program school that they have for all these kids, it's not the same as when we grew up. It's not the same as when we went to school. It's totally different. It's high powered learning, but they're not learning what we've learned. If you were to ask a kid today about the Constitution, they can, I want to say roughly, they can name off quite a bit of the Constitution. Ask them how America was made, they can't tell you. They have no clue. They have basically the main presidents. That's all they remember: Washington, Lincoln, and Roosevelt, and Bush, Clinton, Obama, and Trump. That's pretty much almost all the presidents these kids know. That's, at least out here in California, that's pretty much all they know. The schools, they lack the ability and the time to be able to really teach these kids the way that were brought up, to learn history, to learn the things that we learned up. So back to my story. So it came down to a point. I said, if you are real God, you need to take my grandmother up because if you don't, when she comes home, I'm going to. And that blood's going to be on my hands. And all behold, that night, I went to sleep. I laid my head down. And when I woke up, my grandfather, not my grandfather, yeah, my grandfather was gone and at the hospital, but my grandmother had already passed away. I didn't know it until I woke up the next day to the phone ringing off the hook. And I remember I walked into my mom's room and I said, "What's going on? Why is the phone ringing so much?" And she said, your grandmother passed away last night." And I remember the release that I had. The first thing I said was, "Yes! When's the party?" I couldn't stand my grandmother. And I went on years not standing her. Growing up, every time I'd say something out of line, I would get in trouble. I'd get hurt. I'd get smacked. I'd get slapped. I'd get beat. I was constantly used as a footstool, basically, to her. Everything she said I had to do, no matter if I agreed with it or not. So we're going to flash forward now a little bit, and we're going to go with this. My grandmother's in the ground. I start high school, and I flunked my freshman year. I flunked. I tried my hardest. I think maybe it was that I didn't have the constant, I would say, constant pressure on me that I would normally have coming from my grandmother. I would say that's what it was. But then again, I think it's more of I was filling out my freedom of not being beaten anymore. And I failed multiple tests, but there was also tests that I passed, and I tried my hardest at everything. So I remember it came to a point where I had come to a personal mark in my life to where I said, you know what? There has to be a true God. There has to be a God. There has to. Because I see all these bad things that happen. I was off for everything that's bad. And I had this notion in my mind, even when I was a teenager, for all this bad that goes on, there has to be good. Because you can't believe in just bad without there being good. So I always thought, if God is real and he loves me and he's a God of love, like everybody in school had told me when I would ask, if he was real and he was full of love, how come he's allowing this to happen to me when my grandmother was alive? And I never really understood it. I grew up in basically kind of like an atheistic house. No believe in God, no go to church, don't talk about it, don't associate with anybody, don't talk to anybody that goes to church or knows God. No personal relationship, no form of religion whatsoever. So I was out there. I was out there in that field. I didn't know where I was at. I didn't know what was around me. All I knew is I'm free. I don't have to deal with the things I had to put up with and deal with when I was a kid. So we'll flash forward a little bit to, I want to say, 2001. I graduated high school. I'm happy. I pulled my grades up. I went to summer school, did everything I had to do. And I noticed that I had a little bit of push to get this done and a lot more effort to get things done. And I had said to myself on graduation, you know what? There has to be something higher than this. There has to be. Because I learned a lot when I was in high school. I learned a lot. I flunked, but I also learned. I learned from my mistakes. And I didn't know that all that was going to come in handy for later on in life. I didn't know. So now we'll flash forward a little bit to, let's say, 2002. This is pretty interesting right here. I finally work up the courage to go to the cemetery. Everybody says, "Hey, I'm gonna piss on your grave when you're dead," right? That was a thought that was going through my mind. I'm like, I'm gonna go and do this, but you know what? I'm not gonna go and do that. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna let my grandmother know how I feel. How I felt about growing up, how I felt about the way she treated me, because I needed forgiveness for myself for allowing it to happen. I needed closure. And I didn't think I was going to get it, but I didn't know. So I had tried. And I was going through having a hard time at the job I was currently at. So I left the job I was currently at, I'd say half a day. And, I was like, I'm going to go out and look for another job. Strange thing is, I ended up at the cemetery visiting my grandmother. And on my way in, I see a help wanted sign at the florist shop. And I was like, what's the worst that I could do? Be sitting here putting flowers together? Let me apply. At least it's a job. It's better than what I'm doing right now. It's getting me away from all that stress, all that pressure. I I needed something different. So I did my thing. I talked to my grandmother. I didn't talk to her, but stood on her grave or at her grave, and I was talking at her. I know she couldn't respond back, but I was letting her know how I feel. I was giving it to her. I had raw emotion. I had tears in my eyes, the whole thing. But I had to do that so I can have just a tiny bit of closure. And all behold, I walk out. I walk back to my truck, and I walk in to the mortuary. And I said, "Yeah, I'd like to apply for a job." And I put my application in. 2 days later, I am hired. I'm called in for an interview. I'm hired. I'm doing pre-need I'm setting up funerals. I said, hey, you know what? I'm going to be selling funerals. Hey, this can't be that bad. I'll make good money, right? This has got to be better than what I got. So I met an interesting person, and I had looked at her, and we looked at each other, and it's like as if we knew each other from a past life, or we knew each other from somewhere. We couldn't put our fingers on it. And I struck up a conversation with her. We talked, and we had went out on the back steps, on the back porch, and we were smoking cigarettes. We were like two homies hanging out. And she'd asked me, do you know Jesus Christ? Do you know God? And this was, I would say, the first time in my life I've ever had anybody concerned about my salvation. Try to help me out, try to redirect me. And I had looked at her and I said, no. She's like, well, would you like to know him? I was like, yes, I would. And she led me in the sinner's prayer. And I'll tell you, I said the sinner's prayer. I prayed. I meant it. But afterwards, I didn't feel empowered. Like everybody talks about this, this empowerment and everything. Oh, yeah, you could feel the Holy Ghost running through you and everything. I didn't feel that. What I felt was more peace. I felt that I'm going to be taken care of. I felt everything was going to be all right. And the devil, he don't like this. He don't like it because now he's lost a soul that he's doing his best, been trying his best to get. And I didn't know. They had no clue how powerful I was in the spiritual. I had no clue how much my soul meant to the Lord, let alone just anybody's. I had no clue. So I went on with life. I had a kid, and I suffered a relationship that, we left on sour, bad terms, but we still remain friends to this day. Um, and the thing is throughout the years, I slide away, and then I come back, and I slide away, and then I come back. And it was always my friend, even after I quit working there. See, let me back up a little bit. See, I stopped working doing pre-need, working in the cemetery part of selling pre-need after selling my very first funeral. See, I had a boss that was very, as you say, he wanted to exploit my talents. Once he seen what I was capable of, he wanted me to constantly always do that. And because he liked the money that I made for it, because he got a good cut of it. But see, I was sent out on an appointment by this friend that led me to the Lord. And I sold the funeral to this older couple. And, I was like, wow, I'm going to make so much money off this. But you know what? There's got to be something more. I want to do something different. I don't want to leave the company, but I want to do something different. And I had told my friend that. And she said, let me see what I can do. She looks up and finds out they're hiring for a mortuary job over at the mortuary. I said, hey, let me try to take that. Let me do an inner office or inner company transfer. So I go all the way over to San Bernardino. I go and do what I got to do. I get interviewed. I get hired for the position. And I start. Well, now I'm doing removals. I'm actually removing somebody's loved one from the place of death. Well, this is the first time for me. I've never been this close to death before in my life. I have never done this. This is interesting to me. This is knowledge. I had no clue what happened for the aftercare. I had no clue. I always seen what you see on TV, in the Hollywood movies and shows and everything of a body just laying there on a slab. But I had no clue the scientific things that go into it. I had no clue. And so I worked in what we called the prep room. I'd go and do a removal. I'd help the embalmer embalm. I would help get ready, get the case ready, get the person ready for viewing or for the funeral or whatever. I'd help transport them to the cemetery or wherever the viewing is and everything. So I did this as a job. And my boss was really messed up, really mean, really sour towards me. And, I've had that before in my life with jobs and with bosses being really sour, not liking you and everything. But I kept pushing on. And I kept saying to myself, you know what? Why do some of these people that die, why do some of them have a smile on their face? And then some of these people look so petrified, like they fell down a dark, dirty well and they had no clue and they died with fright on their face. I'd wondered that and I'd pondered that. And then, it's like I looked at the person and I'm like, something's up. And I started kind of categorizing, kind of judging in a way, but not being judgmental. So I started kind of categorizing it. And I seen, the ones that had a smile on their face, they had a peace in their life. Because I noticed those that were surrounded around family and they had a personal relationship or they were religious. Or they were religious. So, you know, I give it that. I give God that. He knew what he was doing with everybody. But I thought God doesn't know what he's doing with me. He doesn't. I think I'm way out there in outfield. He ain't watching me. He ain't seeing me. I could sneak off and I could do what I want to do. Ah, but God got me. He had his eye on me from the beginning, and he still does to this day. So let me tell you, I thought, you know what? I could do this, and I could do that, and I can get away with this, and I can get away with that. Yeah, but you only get away for so long. And when it's time, you get punished. And you feel that punishment. You feel that wrath of what you did wrong. So we'll fast forward out of that. God has an interesting way to interact with people. He's very interesting, very meticulous on how he enters somebody's life and the way he basically steers their life. Some people look, well, God allowed me to suffer my parent dying. I'm mad at God because he took my parent. Okay? I feel for you. I'm not going to tell you can't grieve. I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong. You're entitled to how you feel. You got free will. But the one thing I want you to really, really swallow is this. You see how you feel bad about losing your parent? That's how God feels every time he loses a soul. Okay? He feels bad. But he's got so many souls. He's got way more souls than what the devil does. But I tell you, that devil, he's on the hunt looking for more souls. He's trying to steal every soul he can away from the Lord. The Lord's out there and he's saying, I'm not stopping till I have my last soul. So God ain't going to stop. He ain't going to stop. He's going to continue. But there's going to come to a point where he's going to have to stop. So we'll fast forward a little bit, way a bit. So in 2005, my grandfather passed away. I had no clue that he was going to pass away until a month before he did. My grandfather was the same person, the same man that I knew growing up until one evening he acted a little strange. Acted a little strange, a little out of character. And I kind of questioned that and I said, Lord, what should I do? He went off and he took himself to bed. But I remember that look that he gave me because my mom and me were outside in the back. We were playing cards with my mom's best friend at the time. And I remember we were playing cards, and my grandfather always had this thing. He would always come out and let us know he was going to bed. Well, he opened up the back door and he looked at us on the patio, and he looked at us with like a scowl on his face. We knew that was really not in his character. And he didn't say much, he just stared. Like a blank stare, like as if it was kind of like a stroke that was happening. So he went on to bed, and I didn't feel right. It wasn't sitting right with me. And I remember I went in and I tried to beg and plead with him. Come on, Grandpa, let's go to the hospital. Let's get you checked. You're not acting right. My mom even tried. We all tried. He wouldn't budge. He would not budge 1 second, not one bit. And I remember going out in the front yard and standing behind I forget whose vehicle it was. I think it was mine. Maybe it was my wife's. I'm not sure. And I remember looking up at the sky and I go, God, please direct me which you want me to do. What do you want me to do? You want me to call 911 and get AMR here so they can take him? Or should I just leave it alone and see if it gets better tomorrow? And I remember distinctly that voice that came to me and said, no, call AMR. So I called AMR, called the ambulance. They showed up, the fire department also. And I tell you, they tried their hardest to persuade him to go, but they can't force him to go. So one of them had told me, hey, this is what you need to do. You need to tell him, hey, can you at least go to the hospital and get checked out for me? And I did that. And my grandfather said, yeah, he'll go. I remember I loaded him up in that car so fast and I got him to that hospital so fast. I think I was moving faster than the ambulance moves, but hey, I don't know. I know at that point is when I got introduced to supernatural speed. Because I remember leaving the driveway with him and being at the hospital 2 minutes later. And the hospital was over 10 minutes away. So I don't know what happened for 8 minutes. But I remember I got him out of the car. I walked him in. I let him know what was going on. He sat in that waiting room at Community for almost the whole day before they even called him in. He sat there from 10 something at night till almost 6 something in the morning in the waiting room. Because they said, we don't have any beds available. I kept begging and pleading with him, please. He seems like he's had a stroke. He needs help. He needs medical attention. Well, I assure you, he hasn't had a stroke. I said, okay. I assure you, there's really not much wrong with him. I'm like, okay. I know my grandfather better than they do. But hey, they're medical professionals. I'm not a doctor. I don't know nothing. And I remember I went out multiple times and I prayed, God, if this is not for him, let this pass from him. Not knowing what I was saying, but I did this. So the next morning, we find out that he had 23 brain tumors and he was dying. That sent shocks down my spine. That hurt me really bad. It hurt my mom really bad. Hurt the whole family really bad. But I remember having a peace. And I was there from when he drawed in his last breath. I was there. And I remember holding his hand and feeling the strength that he had still before losing all strength on anything. And he drew in his last breath. And I remember telling him, it's okay. It's okay, Grandpa. It's okay. Go to the light. The Lord will protect you. Now, let me reverse back a little bit. When my grandfather was in the hospital, I remembered I had asked him, do you want to know the Lord? And my grandfather, he's out of his mind. He says, yeah, I want to know. So I told him a little bit about the Lord. I led him to the Lord. I led him in sinner's prayer. And this man, he said the sinner's prayer. He asked for forgiveness. He accepted Jesus into his heart and into his life. I was like astonished. I was like, I grew up in a home where there was no Jesus, there was no God, there was no talk about it, there was no go to church, there was none of that. Being an atheist, we didn't have time for God. That's the way I grew up, was like that. And here, this man, my grandfather, which was the head of the house, he is accepting Christ. And I got to thinking, I wonder why he did that. Is it because he's scared? Because God, he's going to take that fear away. He's going to make sure my grandfather ain't scared. Is it finally he realized that there is a Lord, there is a God? What drew him to that is what I questioned myself with. So then it came to this part, in this point, where he had accepted Christ. I was ecstatic. I was happy because I knew now that if my grandfather passed away, he was going to pass away knowing the Lord, and he was going to be going where he belonged. He wasn't going to no hell. So I remember when my grandfather passed away, he had paralysis, drew in his last breath. And I'll tell you, when he took in that last breath, I seen his face go from a frown to a smile after everything was all done. He had a smile on his face. And Lord is my witness. Lord is my witness. I seen an angel come from the foot of his bed. I seen a bright spirit, and it happened in less than a split of a second, leave his chest, leave his body, and fly up into the wall, up into the ceiling. And I was like, there is a God. There is a God. There is a heaven. There is a hell. They are true. They are correct. The Bible is 100%. Oh, my Lord. I just seen something. I seen a miracle. Wow. And I'd been around death before. So I sprung to action. I called my friend because I needed somebody to console me because my wife was going crazy over it. And my mom just couldn't stop crying. And I'm trying to console people, but I had nobody to console me. So I called my friend and she showed up. And I was given the honor of removing my grandfather from his place of death, placing him into the van, into the Dignity Memorial van, and um, placing him into the Dignity Memorial van. And my friend drove behind the van to the mortuary. And then I was given the honor of pulling him out of the van and placing him into the prep room for the next day. And I set up his funeral arrangements, and I did exactly like he wanted, because my grandfather always had this long-standing thing of, I want to be cremated. I don't want no shindig. I don't want none of things. I don't want none of that. I just want to be dead. I want to be cremated, and I want to be gone. Don't be trying to save any part of me. Don't be trying to do this. Don't be trying to do anything that I don't want, or I'm going to come back and I'm going to haunt you. And I said, I'm going to do what he wants. I got to have a piece of him. I've always got to have a piece of him with me. And, I found out that later on in life that you don't have to have a piece of somebody. They're always with you. And as long as they're with the Lord, you've stored a memory of someone and you've led them to the Lord, to heaven. So you're going to see him again as long as you follow the right path. And you make it into heaven, you're going to see him again. And they're not going to have any kind of pain, no suffering, nothing. They're going to be perfect. So let me fast forward. So we lose the house that we were in. We moved to another house. We lose that house on Thanksgiving. We had to be out by Thanksgiving. So all of us split and went our different ways. Well, not all of us. My friend had moved in with us to help us out, and there was a fight, an argument. And my friend, being, the Lord, she's just like, I'm gonna go where I'm not gonna go where I'm not wanted. So she went on her way. My mom, my wife, me, and the dogs, we went on our way. And see, if it's Lord's will, He's gonna bring people back together. And I would say it wasn't even. I'd say it wasn't even a month, 2 months, and I was back in contact with my friend, and she moved back with us. We ended up losing that house. Now, imagine 3 dogs and 4 people in a motel room. Just one room. Imagine that. That's really, really cramped with all of our stuff inside of our cars. But we got through that. Then there was an argument that led to all of us separating again. Now, my wife and me go on our journey onto what we're going to do. And I fell away from the Lord. I'll be honest. I fell away from the Lord because I was mad. I thought He had me. I thought He had me so much that He wasn't going to allow any of this to happen. I was looking for blue skies. I was looking for there not being any pain, any problems, any nothing. But I was mistaken. No. See, if you accept the Lord, you're going to accept things. And these things are going to come to you. And you're not always going to be able to pass them on. You're going to have to deal with it. Because this is what it's like being a Christian. Believing in the Lord, you're going to have problems. You're going to have trials. You're going to have all this. You're going to have tests. And I didn't know that everything was being a test for me. So I remember we went and we stayed, my wife and me had stayed with her sister. And there was a fight at my son's birthday party. A really bad one. So I ended up temporarily taking my son away from his mom because of some bad choices at the birthday party. So I eventually, after everything was all said and done, I gave him back because I thought everything was going to be just fine. She learned her lesson. She's not going to make the same decisions anymore. Little was I mistaken. Not even 4 months down the line, I'm getting a phone call from my son that he hadn't eaten in 3 days. His mom had left him alone. Left him for 3 days. I'm like, there's no way my son couldn't have eaten for 3 days. He's living with his grandmother and his mom. But my son told me he hadn't, so I was believing what he said. And I asked the Lord, what do you want me to do? He said, you better go pick that child up. You better go pick him up now. I remember I raced over and I picked him up. And I remember the uphill battle I was going to have trying to get full custody of him away from his mom. And I remember going to court and the mediation. And I remember pleading with the mediator. And the mediator's like, it's not going to be easy. I understand, what you're saying, but it's not going to be easy. He's all, but I have to go talk to her because she said that you're very violent. And I was like, well, that's not me. I'm not violent. Not violent towards her. Not violent towards my son. I don't get it. And I remember the mediator came back not even 10 minutes later and said, well, this is going to be easy. She just admitted to using drugs and to drinking. She just admitted to that. So, yeah, you're not going to have a problem. And I'm like, wow. I can't believe this. Okay, so I remember going to court not even 3-4 days later and sitting before the judge. And I remember the judge asked her, do you understand what's going on? And she was even drunk in court. She was even high in court. And I was like, what the heck? Do you have no shame for yourself? And here she was. She grew up a Catholic. And I'm like kind of looking up to her and I'm kind of like, I can't believe this. What the heck? But see, God, He has an interesting path for people. And He intertwines people, their paths, and their lives for a reason. So now we're going to fast forward a little bit. I have custody of him. I had gotten an apartment. Well, during that custody battle of trying to do that, going to court so much, I had to take time off of work. So I ended up losing my apartment. Oh boy, I was homeless for 6 months, living in a car, moving around. I had no clue what I was going to do. Lost my job not even 2 weeks after being homeless. Lost my job that I had. I had a really good job and I lost it because I was so tired that I was sleeping on the job and I lost the job. The Lord had something better for me. I didn't know it. I remember just rest. But I remember I fell off the path. I fell off that beaten path. I fell off that path. I didn't want to hear anything about the Lord. I didn't want to hear anything about God, but I believed, but I didn't want to hear it. I did not want to hear one thing. I was like, how could He allow this to happen to me at a time like this? How? God, very interesting. He had a path. He had a plan. See, I didn't know what His plan was. So I looked up my current boss. I looked her up and I applied. I told her, yeah, are you looking for such and such a person for this position? She said, give me a call back in 2 weeks. I call her back in 2 weeks. She said, give me a call back in 3 days. So I give her a call back in 3 days. Give me a call back this day. So I give her a call back. She says, can you be here tomorrow for an interview? I said, I'll be there. I show up. I go to the interview. After the interview, she hands me the keys to the company vehicle and a check for $300. I remember looking at her and I said, great. And she asked me, well, where's the car going to be stored? I said, well, where I park my car. Well, where's that? Wherever I park my car. She had no clue that I was homeless. And I tell you, the minute I told her that I was homeless, I was like, Lord, did I mess up? Should I have never told her that? I don't get it. And she trusted me. That's something that's uncommon favor coming from somebody that don't know you. To trust you with money and a keys to a company car? What the heck? This is unheard of. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do the best I can do. I'm going to do right. I'm not going to do anything stupid. I'm not going to do anything wrong because that's wrong. How many homeless people in my position would get that? Would be able to be given that uncommon favor? Not very many. So if I mess this up, this is probably her last chance of trusting somebody. I don't want to mess this up. I want to do right. I don't want to mess anything up. And I remember she still trusted me. And I remember not even a year later, me and her had a conversation and she said, you know, had I known you were homeless at that time, every waking part of my bones in my body told me I should grab those keys and that check and run. She said, but I didn't. I trusted you. And I said, thank you for trusting me. As you can see, I didn't let you down. And she's like, no, you didn't. God had me. He put me in a position. But see, now I'm gonna back up a little bit because I'm now homeless again, living in the car still. And my car gets repoed with me in it, with my family in it while we're asleep. I remember, what am I going to do, Lord? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I remember He said, you have the car, the company car. Load all your stuff up, load your family up, and take them over to Motel 6. You have some money, get a room. I said, okay, but that's only going to last us one day. He said, do it. I listened. I didn't want to trust Him, but I listened. And to this day, would you know it, I have an apartment of my own with the keys that I can turn in the door. I don't have to slide into no slot or anything. It has been a long, bumpy road throughout my life. It's been filled with heartache, sorrow, pain. But I'll tell you one thing, God's got me. He's got me. And when I feel that I've slipped and I've fallen away, He's still got me. I'm still there. He still has me. He's still doing everything for me. He's already has that plan laid out before me. And I just have to follow it and stay true to Him. So I say all this to say that the Lord is good. The Lord is just. God is good all the time. And all the time, God is good. So I want to close this, and I'll be posting a video shortly, another video. Please stay tuned for the new video. It will be coming up probably within a few hours. All right. I will see you all later. Bye, YouTube.